conversation. We're live. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Actionable Innovations Conversations. My name is Lucy Gray. I'm the co-founder of Actionable Innovations, and we're really happy to have a slew of teacher educators with us today, and Jennifer Manise from the Longview Foundation. If you are watching on YouTube or hop in, hopefully, there is a comments area. There is a chat. Please make sure that you introduce yourself in that chat. Tell us who you are. I see Aaron just joined. Say hello, say where you are, so where the weather is, what the weather is like where you are. I'm in Chicago, Illinois, where it is about 40 degrees and kind of half raining, half snowing, and kind of gray and today. Jennifer, where are you located?
Good afternoon, everyone. The weather is good. It's sunny and a little bit chilly. I grew up in New England, so I love a good snow in December. And we don't have any snow in Northern Virginia yet. I live right outside of DC, but hopefully we've been getting promises from the Washington Post that we're going to have a rough second half of December, and maybe my children's white Christmas dreams will come true. Great to be with you all.
Great. And Lauren, where are you? And what's the weather like where you are?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Angelone. I am in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the weather's fine. It's been gray. It's like 40s. I haven't actually been outside today, but I dressed my kid with a coat, so it's fine. We're going in. I prefer snow. Like if it's going to be cold, I want snow also. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
I need to get to Cincinnati to go visit your famous hippos there. I'm in love with the baby hippo at the Cincinnati Zoo.
They're pretty cute.
Yeah, super cute. And Shea, where are you calling in from today? And what's the weather like where you are?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shea Kerkhoff, and I am in St. Louis. So we have the Midwest properly represented. It is sunshiny and about 50 degrees here, which is a great day for December.
Wow, that's nice. That's really nice. So I assume that you are a Cardinals fan if you are in St. Louis. Are you a Cardinals fan?
Yes.
I can still talk to you. I'm a Cubs fan, but we can still have a conversation. Yeah.
I grew up in Indiana, so I would say actually I'm a White Sox fan. I don't know which one is worse, Cardinals or White Sox to you.
I think Cardinals. I think my husband.
I think so too.
But we love baseball wherever it is. And I was actually down in St. Louis not this summer, but the summer before, and got to visit. I haven't been to a game, but I went to an event in that complex where the Cardinals play, and that was really amazing. So I need to get back there and see a game at some point. Well, it's great to have you all here. And I just want to go through a few slides. I see lots of friends in the chat. I see Isabel from NEA Foundation. I see Howard. I see lots of people who were in the GLOW conference. Thanks everyone for coming. We're glad to see you here today. So Actionable Innovations Global is the group that the community that I run, and we are an inclusive professional learning community. We want to support and inspire educational leaders. We want to host these conversations and get people connected. And we do write about global innovations and so on and so forth. Really, we started doing these. I think this is about our 50th conversation that we've had, if I'm not mistaken. We really think that, after the pandemic or during the midst of this pandemic, that's really important to reconnect and bring people together again and help people expand their networks. That's really kind of the gist behind these conversations, is to kind of get everybody together again. And so if you want to share your Twitter handle or your LinkedIn URL or anything like that, you want to connect with other people, feel free to do so in the chat. If you're watching from LinkedIn, you're not going to be able to see the chat, unfortunately. There's a separate chat, and it doesn't connect with StreamYard terribly well. So I will try to post some links in LinkedIn for you as well. But just realize that there's kind of a separate chat that's visible through Hopin or through YouTube. You can follow us for news and information about global education and innovation. We have a Medium, we have an online community, we have a Medium blog set up. We're on Twitter, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you scan that QR code, you can find our links, or you can go to linktree/actionableinno and find all of our resources. We just had a really amazing global education conference online. It was the new iteration of what was known as the Global Education Conference. And it took place during International Education Week in November. You can still register for it and watch all the recordings. They will be available through the end of January for free. So you're more than welcome to look at the 6 keynotes and 140 general sessions that were put on in November by many people that are in the audience here. So don't forget about that. Again, please introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to comment. We like a lively conversation. And if you want to tweet anything out, we use the hashtag GlobalEd22. So today, I'm really happy to introduce to you Jennifer Manise, who's the executive director of the Longview Foundation, which is pivotal in the global education world. And there's a few links there for Jennifer that you can follow on LinkedIn, Twitter, and the Longview Foundation website. And she has some teacher fellows with her today, and I'm going to ask her to introduce her fellows to you.
Sure. I am delighted to have a current fellow and a former fellow, current mentor, with us today. When Lucy asked me to come and talk about global competence in teacher education, I thought, who better to hear from than teacher educators? So I'll start with Lauren Angelone, who is at Xavier University and is a current fellow in our program. And she is internationalizing a course around digital spaces and using technology in coursework for teacher educators. Her mentor is Shea Kerkhoff, who is also here and is from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And Shea is actually a triple threat on this panel because not only is she a current mentor, she is a former fellow, and she's a former Longview grantee in the area of teacher education. So she will be able to talk to all kinds of issues related to teacher education, Longview's approach, how we partner, and what our goals are as we get the conversation going. But they're both wonderful. Oh, and by the way, Shea is Lauren's mentor. She is also great. Lucy is a rock star when it comes to compiling resources, making them easily accessible so that you can find what you need. The person that also rises to the top of my list for people that do that extremely well is Shea. And I should also say that Shea is also in charge of the internationalization tag, which is a topical action group for the Teacher Colleges Association, AACTE. So she has her perspective from an institution. She's been a fellow, she's a mentor, and she runs a committee of teacher educators for AACTE. So that is a little bit about them, and we can certainly talk more about their expertise as we get into the conversation.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. I always start out with Don's, my partner in crime with this this gathering. We ask these questions that he's adapted from Vanity Fair's Proust, I guess it's Proust, not Proust, questionnaire. He's made some education-friendly questions to kind of get people to open up. And so as kind of an icebreaker, I'm going to ask you a few questions and see what your responses are. So Jennifer, I'll start with you and then we can rotate through the group. What's your perfect idea of happiness?
Oh, gee. I even looked at these in advance, and when I saw that one, I was like, please let Lauren get that. Please let Shea get that, not me. But I'll take it. I think that being with the people that I love in a setting that is peaceful is really my idea of happiness. I don't like the word happiness. And there are lots of different things that make me happy. I'm really more about peace, but if you're going to ask me about happiness, it's either that, the people I love in a peaceful situation, or it might just be a delicious box of chocolates. I also am
I'm
very
with you on
happy.
both fronts. I'm with you on both fronts. I love traveling with I think my perfect idea of happiness is traveling with my family and
I
seeing
do.
my
Yes.
kids, seeing my kids kind of, the two things I've wanted from my children who are 19 or 20 and 24 are, I want them to be lifelong learners and to love reading. Those are the kind of the things that I've always wanted for them. And I feel like travel kind of brings that out for them.
Yes.
Or I see it in action, up close and personal. So I'm with you in terms of spending time with the people you love. Doing something interesting or peaceful is great. Lauren, how about you? What's your idea of perfect happiness?
That is very difficult. I feel like right now I would say something like a space and time to myself to be peaceful. I think it's the end of the semester and I have a sick child and it's just, been a little hectic. But I like your answer. Traveling with my family is one of my favorite things to do, and that does probably bring me more joy than peace. So yeah, all those words wrapped up together. I feel like this is a very difficult philosophical question.
There's so many things it could be, and I think some of these things, your answers probably will evolve over time too. Like there's no right or wrong answer, and this is not meant to be a gotcha thing or anything. It's just something to kind of lighten things up a little bit. Shea, how about you? What's your idea of perfect happiness or somewhat perfect happiness?
Well, Jennifer said the word happiness was the one that kind of got her. Perfect is my word that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just don't even like to think about. But happiness, for me, is adventure. So if I'm on an adventure, that's when I'm happy. And that could be walking around the city, a new part of the city, and exploring it, or it could be international travel. It can look like a lot of different things, but typically when I am on an adventure, that's when I'm happy.
Okay. I think that we're all kind of related in our views on that, traveling, adventure, being with people. Okay. The next question is, this is also a hard one too, but it could be somebody who's fictional or it could be somebody who is real for you. Which educator do you most admire or identify with? Either one. Jennifer, is there an educator that you admire or identify with? Could be a fictional teacher. It could be somebody that meant something to you when you were younger.
I'm going to pick somebody current who's never been my educator, but the principal at my daughter's previous high school, they both have graduated. My youngest just graduated in June, and her principal, Jeff Litz, is an amazing guy. I watched him over the 5 years that my kids were at that high school, be at everything, be present. He had commanded respect, but also was well liked by parents and by students. And I have so many stories where Jeff has shown empathy, servant leadership, how he's promoted other people, that I just have the utmost respect for him. And I know that if I have this basket full of stories, that many other families do too. So I'm going to shout out Jeff Litz for a great educator that I deeply admire.
That's amazing. You're lucky to have found somebody like that, and I think to be able to do all those different things as an administrator is really difficult. So you must be pretty special. How about you, Lauren? Is there an educator that you admire fictionally or in real life or past or present?
My first thought was Bell Hooks, who passed recently and was one of my favorite thinkers around critical pedagogy. But I would shout out to someone who I know personally who recently left Xavier and was the head of our DEI initiatives. Her name's Tracy Duest. And I was just reaching out to her because of the way that she was able to lead on topics that are difficult in a way that showed, I want to say nice, but like nice isn't the right word, right? Because I think nice can be complicity, right? But she's kind and joyful. And, she led this group called Aspiring Anti-Racist Allies. And so it was a group of white professors, learning about anti-racist pedagogies and really about ourselves. And she was just great at taking us all where we were, so we could really learn and grow and not feel, I don't know, we always felt like we could share anything, and we've made great strides in that group. And so, having the hard conversations in a way that's still joyful is just something I really respect about her.
That's huge. That reminds me that we have another guest booked for Actionable Innovations conversations in January 13th. And her name's Lisa Vahey, and she lives in Cleveland. And she's part of a coalition that you might be interested in that's related to DEI work. I'll say more about Lisa at the end, but it's small world kind of thing. I think you would really enjoy the kind of work that she does. Shea, how about you? Any educators that you find inspirational?
I'm going to go with Nell Noddings, because anytime I read anything she's written, I just find it very inspiring.
So tell us more about Nell.
So she is an education theorist, and she writes about care and what care looks like and why it's an important part of education. Of course, content's important. Of course, there's, skills and knowledge that are important, but she helps us remember and gives us a theory to think about how important caring for our learners, caring for the world is, as well as the knowledge and skills.
Okay, that's great. I'm gonna have to look up for work. I don't know her, so that's good for me to know. If I were going to pick anybody, I would pick. Right now, I've been thinking a lot about my daughter's kindergarten teacher, who's one of the best teachers I've ever seen in the classroom. She, my daughter is neurodivergent. She's got ADHD. She is graduating from Landmark College in 10 days now, and she's really blossomed. And back when Julia was in kindergarten and had, there were some issues, and Christina Hayward at the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools was not flummoxed by any challenges that we presented as a family. And she created a really lovely environment for Julia, and was really cognizant of her needs and that sort of thing, and made learning very interactive for everyone. And so I was thinking about her and how Julia is now an adult. And I want to send her an email letting her know that where Julia is and how far Julia's come since she was in her classroom, 20 years ago almost. So I'm thinking about Christina Hayward today, who's just, if anybody ever has the chance to go to the lab schools at University of Chicago and observe, she's just an amazing early childhood educator who is always learning and always trying to do the right thing by her students. So that's who I'm thinking about today. Okay, well, I think it's time for us to talk about teacher education and global competence. So I'm going to take away these slides for us so that we can all see each other a little bit better here. And let's see if I can get a better view. That's better. So Jennifer, do you want to start out by telling us a little bit about Longview, what you've been up to, and this fellowship program, and we'll go from there?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Lucy. So the Longview Foundation was founded in 1966. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we're tiny. We're a tiny philanthropy that's DC based, and we love to hit above our weight size with regard to impact, and we're very thoughtful about it. But I'd love to give you just a little bit about what Longview's goals are through the words of our founder, William Breese. Mr. Breese lived through World War I and World War II and stuck around Europe after World War II to help nation build and put things back in order as best as could be done after an earth-shattering and life-changing event. And he came back to the United States in the late 50s, early 60s, and saw a really strong nationalistic mentality where the United States was really concerned with what was happening here and wasn't really as much interested about the world. And that deeply concerned him that we might be setting ourselves up for future conflicts that would be cataclysmic. And so he started Longview with the idea that peace itself was worth pursuing, and really wanted to dedicate his resources, his personal resources, towards peace and understanding. And he said that Longview should rededicate itself as a seed money foundation with a balanced program on pre-collegiate school level, so K-12, with long-range priorities, and have a special attention to teacher education at the elementary and middle school levels, with dissemination, conflict resolution, and human rights as some of the priorities. And we've really focused on global competence in the past decade, because we see that when students understand the world and have a curiosity about it, they're able to take perspectives and take action on issues of global significance. But we are very dedicated to that new teacher cohort, those teachers that are coming into the classroom. And we have really focused our efforts on traditional teacher prep programs, which I know have not been as popular among philanthropies for the past 2 decades, let's say. But we think that, considering that 60% of new teachers come from traditional prep programs, that we really want to work with prep programs to make sure that the faculty and the mindset of the university are preparing new teachers to be curious, to be confident, to be humble, and to be ready to learn about the world and bring that enthusiasm to their courses. And knowing that a philanthropy of our size has to be extremely careful on how we spend our resources, we have committed to building this fellowship program that we actually took over from another organization, with the idea that a cohort of faculty go through every year. We'd like them to be new to middle faculty, so that hopefully they're going to be staying in preparing teachers, that profession, for a while. And it can be any discipline. We've had technology, we've had, of course, reading, writing, math, science, social studies, lots of different topics. We love it when it's a foundations course that is going to be impacted, because that's even more teachers that will take those courses. But essentially, how the fellowship works is there is a course that a teacher educator is going to revise and bring more of global aspects into. They get a mentor, aka Shea in this instance, and we bring in experts so that there's this online learning component. It lasts for a year. They have deliverables that they have to submit. They're hearing from experts in all different kinds of areas of global education. And then they present their research, as well as the mentors presenting their own research. And it's a lovely community. We are on our, I was going to say 6th, but it might be the 7th cohort. It's either the 6th or the 7th cohort. And it's a lovely community of teacher educators. What's really fun is to see them come back and become mentors, of course, and to see the kinds of leadership positions that they're taking in different universities. At the same time, we continue to fund teacher education at universities, and maybe Shea can talk a little bit about the grant that she got from Longview. And I'd love to talk more, Lucy, if we have time, about teacher education, how important it is, and how critical it is that we all work to really elevate the profession, because it is a tremendous profession, and the professionalism of teacher education programs, there's always room to grow, but there's just lots of great stuff happening, and I'm not sure that they have the megaphone that they deserve with regard to the great work that they're doing.
I just got done working with this group of teacher educators on a lit review of ed tech related, how ed tech is infused into teacher preparation programs. And it feels to me that there's not a lot of conversation necessarily between K-12 and the teacher educator programs around innovating in general. But there seems to be kind of a gap. And it seems to me that Lauren and Shea are coming from really strong practitioner backgrounds themselves. You guys were classroom teachers, correct? Before before working for a university. So, and I've done some teacher ed tech related teaching at the higher level. So I'm not an expert by any means like you are, but it feels to me that there's been a lot of pressure on teachers to perform and improve and strive for the best over the last several years. There's been so much pressure. But is there pressure? I'm curious, is there pressure on at the teacher preparation level to innovate and to change as well? I personally have not seen that. I'm wondering from your perspective, just out of curiosity, do you see, Lauren and Shea, a lot of pressure being put on schools of education in general to do things differently? Or is that a loaded question?
No, it's fine. I think that there are different types of institutions. And so the reason I am where I am is because they value innovation. And I saw that they were doing really interesting and forward-thinking kinds of programs, and that's what drew me to the University of Missouri St. Louis. I think that I wouldn't call it pressure, but what I see happening in teacher education is I just got back from 2 conferences, and there's energy, there's excitement when around research. And so it's through research that we tend to focus our efforts, but research is that continuous growing and continuous improving. And so one of the things I like to think about is bridging research and practice, because sometimes the innovation is happening in practice. And then as colleges of teacher education, we can then research it to see if it's working or why it's working, because, we can see the how and the why. And then sometimes the innovation is happening through the research, but we have to make sure that if we're only publishing in research or journals, is it really getting to the audience that the research is intended for? So also thinking about doing presentations, not only at researcher conferences, but at practitioner conferences, and writing in teacher journals as well. So there is pressure to do research. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's always been there, right? Yeah, it's always been there. So Lauren, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would add on to that. I think Shea said almost exactly what I would say in terms of it depends on the university, right? I'm at Xavier University, which is a liberal arts university. There's certainly not pressure to innovate, though I think we do innovative things in small pockets, right? But only a quarter of my time is dedicated to research because I'm not at an R1 institution, though I look to those R1s for ideas. And I think Shea also hit the nail on the head that oftentimes I'm looking at what's going on in the classroom to make sure I'm preparing my pre-service teachers for what's going on out there. So sometimes it does work in reverse. They're doing, like, for example, STEAM, I think, was practitioner first and research followed. And so I don't know, to me, the innovation is really exciting and I wish I had more time to do it. But I really enjoy trying out new things with my students, writing about it. Thankfully, too, part of being at a teaching first institution is that the teaching sorts of scholarship are, count just as much for us in our tenure journey as the research sorts of scholarship. So that's kind of an exciting thing, though, just a little bit less time.
So global competence to me is part of being an innovative educator. And Jennifer, what's your definition of global competence, just to set and then Shea and Lauren, maybe you can talk about your work with the fellowship program. That would be it would be really helpful to kind of set the table for people who may have not heard the term global competence.
Sure. I follow the global competence definition that Veronica Boix-Mancia, here I'm going to put up the book, just came out, Educating for Global Competence. This is the second edition. It started in 2011. It's really perspective taking, being able to communicate to different audiences, doing thoughtful investigative research, and then taking action on issues of global significance. It was adopted by the Council of Chief State School Officers, the US Department of Education, and ultimately the OECD, which is an international organization. So there are lots of great definitions for global competence, but I stick with the one about really kind of viewing the world through a global lens, recognizing that you have a place in it, and then taking appropriate action. Lucy just posted a great resource on that, of the new book. So that's my definition.
So Shea and Finn, do you want to talk a little bit about your work with your experiences with Longview and how the fellowship has your research within the fellowship and that sort of thing? I would love to hear about what you specifically have done.
Sure, I'll start. So I was a fellow, and I worked to include global competence in one of the courses I taught. And my research is on global education, so it was a really great fit for me. What I believe is that teachers cannot teach their students to be globally competent unless they are globally competent. So we're working on two levels that teacher education is always working on. The first level is teacher as student, and then the second level is those teachers teaching their students. So to begin with, thinking about the teachers as growing in their global competence, I started the class by asking about teachers to share about themselves, thinking about James Banks' concentric circles of identity. So starting local and then national and then international. And so we started right away to make connections with each other that were global connections. So that was really interesting. People who had visited the same country or had even grew up in the same country. So that was great. It helped me to see the way that the teachers were already global before they even came to my class, right? Like, they're not these blank slates that I'm going to give them global competence. They are coming with global knowledge and skills. And then we build on that. And so one of the ways that I revised the course to have them build on it is for them to be intentional about bringing in international readings or viewings or sources to their own learning. And that meant that in addition to the readings I had already prepared, I tried to bring in an international voice. And that just helps increase diversity and multiple perspectives and making sure that we're learning from a lot of perspectives. And then they were then to take that on in their own lesson planning. So their assignment was to create a unit or a lesson, and then they could also include international sources for their students. So that was one thing that I did to try to infuse global competence in my class.
What were some of the sources that your students or you found? Did they commonly refer to when they were infusing this into their lesson planning? Did they look at international newspapers or what kinds of, I'm just curious, like what kinds of things they found useful and interesting in terms of, infusing the international perspective into things?
So I that class was K through 12 and all different content areas. So it was a wide range, but I can speak to a couple. So one teacher was a Spanish teacher, taught Spanish, and had always done work on helping students think in hospitable ways about immigration, and had always used the US-Mexico border as the place to contextualize the conversation. But he decided, and after doing his working on it, or while he was working on his project, to move the conversation to Spain, and start the students reading about immigration issues in Spain, and then bring the conversation to the US-Mexico border. And what he found was that typically those conversations were very politically charged in his classroom, and he didn't see students really revising their thinking or coming to a new understanding, because they came in with such strong ideas that they were then looking to defend. But starting it in a space that wasn't politically charged for them, and thinking through the issues, and then bringing it, making that global connection, and then making it a local connection, he saw that students were able to come to new understandings and maybe even revise their original position on some issues. So that was one thing that was interesting. And then a science teacher had students look at different policies around cloning in different countries. So I don't remember the actual the text sources, but it was around different policy. Yeah.
So I think just so it sounds like looking at the subject matter from an international perspective, not just, throwing in a video or a piece of literature or whatever, but kind of looking at it, from outside the US, I think seems to be really important. I like how that teacher used Spain as an example, because immigration issues happen everywhere, right? It's not just the US. I think it's so important for people to understand that there's humans involved, and there's so many things that are intertwined with that. It's not just what it's turned out to be here in the US in general. So that's great. Lauren, so how did you fit in with Shea? Shay's your mentor, or I can't remember who's mentor. Shay's your mentor. So how did that
work? Well, so we were matched up, I think, based on our kind of some previous areas of expertise that include technology, and I would say some literacy, even though I'm not a literacy specialist. But I am definitely a baby global educator compared to Shea being a grown-up global educator. So I came to Longview through a colleague who right next door to me now is a mentor also. She went through the program, and she's also a grown-up global educator. But I think she noticed that in my work in instructional technology, my background is critical theory. And I think critical theory aligns really well with the theory that undergirds global education, because, in critical theory, we're often critiquing power, and we're also, critiquing our own systems. And so it really matches well. And so in my own instructional technology classes, I was always looking for ways that students could interact globally, because one of the affordances of using technology is this very easy reach nowadays, right? And also it's a way for students to kind of get this broader perspective, and so therefore can critique these different ways that power operates, right? Whether that's through race or gender or educational systems. So I was lucky enough, I applied and was lucky enough to be accepted and matched up with Shea. And so what I ended up focusing my course on was the global read aloud. So in the past, my students had used Twitter, and we do Twitter chats. We ended up just talking to ourselves, really. But the idea was that they had this reach and could reach out to teachers all over the world in theory. But Shea suggested, and I had mentioned the global read aloud. I would have them read a little bit about these different ways that they could interact as teachers. But Shea suggested like actually trying it out. And so we did that this semester. We used Twitter. I actually found teachers through Facebook. There are all these Facebook groups that are created by teachers to connect, and then they share where they're connecting, whether that's on Twitter or they create a Flipgrid or they Zoom and do some live chats depending on time zones. And we ended up following a Canadian teacher, a 5th grade teacher, who was on Facebook asking, who wants to participate in our Twitter slow chat. And so my students read this YA novel and participated along with the Canadian teacher who, is the liaison for her students. Her students actually aren't on Twitter. And so we participated in that. And then as a follow-up, I had them create, because like Shea in her class, I have K-12 educators, all content areas. But what I had them do then was look at the book and their interactions and create then a follow-up activity that they might do in their class, a project that's based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so I felt like I was able to create these projects because I finally had some theory, right? I had a mentor. I understand the 4 domains of global competence. And so I could more specifically direct my students to grow in global competence instead of just using tools to maybe reach out kind of haphazardly. So I was able to go from kind of a haphazard global education, try to something that was more purposeful, and I think, much more meaningful and authentic for my students.
In both of your cases, how did your students react to a more globalized perspective? Did they enjoy this? Was there any way to measure their growth personally too? If that's one of the objectives, is to have teachers grow personally so that they can be globally competent. Did you have any way of measuring that, out of curiosity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mia says everything, right, Lauren? Out of my dissertation research, I developed a survey for teaching global readiness. I use that word global readiness because it's a little more of an umbrella term that can include global competence, global citizenship, global literacy. Because I have students from different disciplines, they use different terminology. So for instance, social studies, global citizenship would be what they would be talking with their students about. So it's called the Teaching for Global Readiness Scale. And yeah, I'm happy to share it with people if they want to reach out. Thank you for putting my LinkedIn in there. And it has items that are about the teacher, but also about more focused on helping the teacher help the students with global competence. And then there's also the Global Learning Continuum that was developed by a team of researchers in North Carolina. And that also has parts that are about the teacher themselves and also parts about teaching, the practice of teaching. Do you want to talk more about that, Lauren? About what you did?
Yeah, so I used Shea's Teaching for Global Readiness Scale. They did a survey before the Global Read Aloud and then after the Global Read Aloud. And so I'm still in the midst, like there was some movement for sure, but I'm in the midst of really analyzing that data. But yes, and also reflections, right? Which to me are always more meaningful personally, as I'm more of a qualitative researcher. And so, they reflect throughout too on their experience.
So I've been thinking a lot about my student teaching experience, which was through, I went to Beloit College and they had this program called, through the Associated Colleges of the Midwest, it was called the Urban Education Program, and it no longer exists. And I went to Chicago and did my student teaching in a pretty diverse neighborhood. And there are 2 women that ran this program. One of them who I'm still in touch with, and they were experts in multiculturalism, and I think back about how clueless my cohort was in terms of having kind of a multicultural perspective and that sort of thing. We were all kind of, I don't know, led very sheltered lives and really hadn't lived very much at that point. So I think back to what I was and what I've evolved to, and I think it's a matter of experience and reflection, and having those, you have to have some sort of experience that's going to push you in a different way. But the reason I'm telling you this is that the woman that ran my program, I still think the world of. Her name is Marilyn Turkovich, and she started a multicultural master's program at Columbia College at one point, and now lives in Bainbridge Island, Washington, and is the executive director of something called the Charter for Compassion. And she and they do some interesting networking kinds of things with schools that you might be interested in. But I just think that this is so important. And I also know that there are other teacher prep programs out there who've spent time on helping teachers find themselves and understand where they are in the ecosystem of a school. And that I think that kind of programming has evolved since I went through my student teaching 30 years ago. It feels like there's more intention with growing teachers that have a growth mindset, who have an understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. It just feels like it's gone in a better direction in general.
Yes, I think that is where most of the innovation and that's where I see the most growth in teacher education, is in the area of being culturally responsive, first being culturally competent. And I think that when we're talking about global competence, cultural competence is part of that, and intercultural competence. So in order to be, it's like these concentric circles, if you will, like in order to be globally competent, that involves being interculturally competent. And in order to be interculturally competent, you have to be culturally competent. So you have to understand yourself as a cultural being in order to be responsive to culture and understand, being able to connect across difference, and also not make assumptions based on your own experiences because they're culturally specific. So that, I think, that undergirds the global competence work, especially when coming from a critical lens.
And I just want to pop in and say, I agree that that's one of the areas where we've seen a lot of growth in teacher education. Another area that was kind of touched on earlier that I think is worth highlighting again is the connections to the districts that are surrounding colleges of education, and having a relationship where you're in classrooms and classroom teachers are coming to the university for professional development. And it's more of an exchange and an opportunity for both sides to learn about how they can do their work better and serve children better, which is what this is really all about. I was reflecting on this all in the context. I was listening to Ezra Klein earlier today. I haven't listened to the whole episode, but it's kind of how he has got some British economics specialist on talking about how everything's different post-pandemic, and how economics aren't going to be the same, and we have to stop thinking that they're going to be the same. And I had this revelation that the same is true about education, and the idea that we are going to train teachers the same way and have the same level of enthusiasm for going into the teaching field is going to be different. It was already somewhat downturning, then upturning a little bit, and then the pandemic hit. And at first, teachers were really appreciated, and then they were kind of vilified. And just, if we want to attract people to the field, we need to honor the professionalism. And in colleges of education, where I'm seeing great collaboration between school and college of education and district, I think there's a lot of hope and excitement, but we also have to really think about how we're going to innovate, because there is a workforce shortage, and we need to be thoughtful in how we think about teaching. It's not a lifelong career anymore. People don't go in right after high school, do their 4 years, and spend the next 40 years in a classroom. So there's a lot that can happen. And one of the things that I think is so exciting is this idea of curiosity and lifelong learning that we've been kind of tossing about throughout this entire conversation. And the idea that bringing who I am, learning about who that is, knowing that it's going to change, knowing that I'm going to grow, knowing that I get to go along on a journey with my students, they get to grow too, whether that's happening at a classroom level or at a college of education level. To me, that's an attractive career. And what I love about what both of these amazing women are doing is that they are creating this atmosphere where they're personally growing, where their students are growing, and where it's building a brighter tomorrow. So that's kind of a long-winded segue, but I did want to pop in and say that.
I love that. And I had the opportunity to visit a classroom at my college because I'm on the alumni board for Beloit, and talk to students about why they were going into education and what their career path could be like. And one of my points was, you don't have to be in the classroom for 40 years. There's different ways to take your career. I think I'm an example of that. But I asked them, what was most fascinating was I turned the tables and asked them why they wanted to be teachers. And they all wanted to be teachers because they wanted to make a difference for kids. I mean, some of the stuff hasn't changed over the years. They wanted to be the teacher they never had, which really made me sad. There was one student that was in tears telling me her story. They wanted to create safe and inclusive spaces for their students. The idealism is there. The people who are going into education are idealists who want to make a difference. And so it seems like teacher education programs are great places to infuse global competence, because the mindset is there. The students seem to be open to learning and making a difference. And this is part of that, if that makes sense. So that's really exciting. How has it been? How did any other stories about how your students reacted or experiences they had, maybe teaching some of these units they developed or anything like that? I would love to hear a little bit about their response.
I'm also curious about their peers, like how your peers are reacting to you taking this on. But sorry to interrupt, Lauren. Go ahead.
I think I had zero pushback from students. The only possible pushback was, why are we reading a book in tech class, like a novel? But most, only from one person, and most really enjoyed it. But the idea of global education, I put it in my syllabus this semester as the theme to explain, why we were doing this, connect it to my content, to connect it to the Longview fellowship that I received. And I have to say, it was a cumulative excitement that grew over the semester. They really enjoyed reaching out. There were bumps along the way in terms of just like, interacting with the teacher, and if, we should be doing that as college students, because it was really kind of a place for teachers of kids to be interacting. But they were very interested in then doing a project that they could really connect to their own content area or their grade levels that they'll be teaching. And I think you're kind of right too. I mean, maybe this is sort of a gendered look at teachers, which is of course a gendered profession, and that they are open to learning and they want to do good in the world. And so I think broadening that to the world at large is a small jump. Yeah.
I also found that students were enthusiastic. I think that I was, I guess, a little surprised, even though it's my research area and I'm very passionate about it, that sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. Like sometimes we can get in our own way. That's what I mean. And like my own doubts about, is this really, it's not in the course objectives. Is this really what is the most important thing to be teaching? Like my own questions about relevance were getting in the way. But when I had the fellowship and there was my department chair and my dean signed the paper. Like they were on board too. And because of that, I had some confidence around trying it. Just try it before getting in my own way and talking myself out of it. And then, like Lauren, there was no pushback. There was excitement around it. And so that positive experience, now I don't even have those second guessing kinds of thoughts going on. Jennifer asked about peers. Well, I had so much fun and I learned so much and got so much out of the fellowship and the way it was structured. I applied for a Longview grant the following year to replicate it at my university, and had 10 people from the College of Education and from the College of Arts and Sciences, which are also involved in teacher education because of the content areas, join in, where we also took a course and integrated global competence, and then had monthly meetings where we could support each other. We could problem pose, problem solve, discuss, work on our own global competence, as well as how we're going to teach students. So the peers were very excited and we're happy to join in. And I think that one of the things we realized is how much we are already globally connected. And now post-pandemic, or if we can even say that really, that it's even more obvious, right? Like we don't even have to make the case now about how we're so globally connected. We are feeling it. We felt it. We felt it when we saw the disease that traveled. Now we're feeling it with systems of like supply chain systems that are all global. So we're actually feeling it.
So here's the question for you all, and anybody can take it, and maybe we can wrap up with this. We're going to probably run a little bit late if you don't mind. I hope you don't have to run off somewhere, but this is a really good conversation and important. How can we elevate the idea of global competence in K-12, but also in teacher education? It feels to me that, to your point, Shea, that we've been living in a global. So if this pandemic hasn't brought it home that we're living in a global society, then I don't know what else would. It's never been more important to have a global perspective, and so how do we, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem like global competence is getting as much attention as it, in K-12 at least, that it should. What do we do, in your view, to elevate this to in K-12 and in teacher education?
Lauren, you go first.
I can start that conversation, although I think it's a huge one to have. And at Xavier University, we have a new strategic plan that's going into place, and internationalization is on it. And so, Xavier is a social justice focused Jesuit Catholic institution. So it's always been important, but when it's not in the strategic plan, right? The money doesn't follow, the grants, the activity around it doesn't follow. And so I think putting it in the forefront in our strategic plan is going to be really helpful for us in teacher education. We already have one other Longview fellow, and we're already pushing global initiatives. And we have grants for study abroad to increase the amount of kind of short-term study abroad, which are a little bit easier for us to do with education majors who happen to have full loads every semester, and not that much wiggle room. And I think, of course, that leads into K-12, but I think it's a bigger question of priorities in K-12. And I think that part of that answer has to do with advocacy, like at the state level, because until we make it a priority in standards, in assessments, which I'm not advocating for more standardized tests, but right now it's going to be in Ohio reading and math, and we have a third grade guarantee for reading that if you don't pass by third grade, you are held back. And so that's the focus at the moment. Yeah, but I think it's going to be on its way out, but it's been around for a while. And so I think part of the answer is, from the top, and that takes advocacy also from, I think, colleges of education, faculty in colleges of education.
So I saw Jill Warner is here. So shout out to Jill Warner, who was working at the Indiana Department of Education and worked to bring global readiness or global competence across content areas. So I think traditionally we talked about global citizenship, and that was the purview of the social studies teacher. And we talked about cultural competence, and that was the purview of the world languages teachers. And what we are seeing is that the number of hours that students are spending in those kinds of classrooms is going down as these, kind of back to basics, reading and math, those hours are going up. There's only so many hours. The number of hours hasn't changed, but the priorities change. So when we start to think about integrating it across the curriculum so that when we are reading, we're reading texts from international perspectives too. When we're using technology, we're using it to connect to global audiences. When we're in science, we're thinking about the issues that we're reading about in science, but from international perspectives. I think that holds promise. And so, Jill was leading the way about bringing that from the top down in a way that was resource driven. So it wasn't about like policy driven, you must, and it's going to be assessed, but here are the resources for you. And so that's one way that we can move forward. But it's always tense. There's always more that we want to do, more to teach, more ways that we want to help our students grow. And there's only so much time.
I'll just build on that and say that it's a big problem in the United States. Nationalism hasn't gone away. We tend to be pretty focused on our neighborhood, who we are, where we are. But at the same time, as was said, viruses don't recognize borders. Climate change doesn't recognize borders. And we have problems of global significance that we need to contribute to the solutions. And we need to help the next generation be ready to contribute to the set of solutions that we're going to need. So with that in mind, knowing that there are big global issues, I would say think about where you are and where you have influence. And I always like to describe global competence as a nice cup of tea. It's completely infused through everything you do versus a cappuccino where it's just the foam on top and you can say, no foam today. If you are living your life and thinking about the world and your place in it and how you are making a difference, you will find opportunities to influence others and influence your sphere to be more global. And if we're all doing that, whether it's somebody that can advocate and send a letter to a new administration with 50 organizations signing on saying this is important, we want you to prioritize it, with a bunch of secretaries of education also signing on, then do that. If you are a teacher educator, you can hold brown bags for your peers. You can think about your own courses and where you can bring in different resources that are from perspectives outside of the United States. Building the curiosity, modeling it, recognizing it's never done. There's always more to learn, and just keep going. But don't get overwhelmed. There's hope in the opportunities that we're all presented with, and it's together that we can make a change. It's not any one of our jobs. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you to make a brighter global future for everyone.
That's the perfect ending. Thank you, everyone, for an amazing hour. And I think this is going to be incredibly useful to everyone in K-12 and in higher ed. Jennifer, I want to ask you, you have something going on next week. Is that a public event, or is it something that you want to tell people about?
We are We're hosting a book party for Tony and Veronica for their new Global Competence book. If you're interested in participating and haven't gotten an invitation, you can DM me on LinkedIn and I will get you the link to the invite. It is an invite-only thing, but if you're here, you're a friend of Longview. And Lucy, thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. It's been so rich. I've loved hearing from Shea and Lauren and you. You are an amazing leader in this field, and I'm really grateful.
Wow. Well, thank you. You guys are amazing, and I'm so glad to get to know you and a little bit better, Shea and Lauren and Jennifer. And thank you so much for being here. I do want to mention. Oops, I just got rid of my whole screen. I do want to mention what's coming up next. One of the things. Let's see if I can put it up here, up my slides up here. I'm going to put this up here for just to wrap up. Thanks to Jennifer, Shea, and Lauren for being here. We really appreciate it. The recording will be up in YouTube right away. And I'll send a link to people who registered as well. And Jennifer, thank you for everything. It's been great. Here's Jennifer's contact information too. If you need to get hold of her on Twitter, LinkedIn, or her website. I also will put it into the chat when we're done as well. Next week, in January, we're going to start up again. And we have a couple sessions that are coming up that I think will be really exciting. This is Lisa Vahey, who is a literacy expert. She's in Ohio. She's in the Cleveland area. And she has started an organization that's trying to combat hate and so on and so forth in education. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her organization, her advocacy work. I've known her for a long time. Her son was in preschool with my son. She worked at a place at University of Chicago where I worked for a little while too. And I'm excited to hear and catch up with her because it's been a long time. We also are going to have Brian Morello from Beloit College, where I went to school, who is the director of their entrepreneurial center. And he's going to talk about work as well that he's doing with college students. And he's really impressive. That's all I can say right now. But I don't have them up on Eventbrite yet, but I'll send the links to register for these events with my follow-up email from this. But those are the two that are coming up in January. And we're going to try and do these weekly conversations on things related to innovation in education and interesting people in education, so that we can all kind of come together and be part of a community again. So thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and the recording will be up shortly. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Happy weekend.